Okay, hello, I think we are now live. Welcome everyone. Sorry we're a little bit late, few technical issues back of house, but yeah, I just want to welcome you all into this virtual session this afternoon. So if you haven't been here before, this is part of the programme called Make for Tomorrow. My name is Lucy. I work for Sussex Partnership Trust as their Arts and Health lead, and our Arts and Health programme is called Make Your Mark. So Make for Tomorrow, and apologies if you have been here before and you've heard me say this a million times, but I will say it for those who haven't heard it yet. So Make for Tomorrow is a participatory online arts programme. It started at the beginning of September and it's running all the way through to the end of October, and then we'll finish up in November with an amazing week-long festival. But the programme is for anyone, any adult who's associated with the Trust. So whether you're a service user, a patient, a family, friend, carer, you work for the Trust, everyone is welcome. And we're really happy that you're here this afternoon. So the programme is made up of kind of two strands. We've got a strand of visual arts, so some amazing visual artists delivering participatory workshops and projects, and then a more sort of performance and literature strand. So lots of really interesting and exciting actors and performers and writers from that world. So an interesting kind of cultural mix of different art forms. So the project is delivered in partnership. So it's us at the Trust, and then also we've got these two amazing arts partners. So one of which is Arts Over Borders, who have been bringing together this amazing programme of performers, and I'll introduce you to Sean in a minute, and he can tell you a little bit more about that. And then our visual arts partner is the fantastic Hospital Rooms, who are all about getting visual artists into clinical spaces and transforming them and making them more kind of interactive, creative and more positive places to be. So they've been bringing together this amazing programme of visual artists. So both fantastic organisations, and we're really chuffed that they have come to work with us on this programme. And then, very importantly, behind the scenes, we have our fantastic tech partner called CogApp. So I am not a big technological brain, so I, for one, but also the whole programme, we're very grateful for CogApp. So they've made sure that all our kind of tech staff, they press the right buttons, they get us set up with the links and stuff. So they've been supporting us doing that. So there's four partners, and each bringing an interesting dynamic to the table. So anyway, I'll stop nattering on, and we can get on with the afternoon, because we have two extraordinary women this afternoon who are going to have a chat with us, and I'm sure it's going to be a real treat. And don't forget, it is interactive, so you can absolutely get involved in the conversation. So there's a little button at the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A, and you can, if you've got a question for either Claire or Fiona, you can just type in your question, and hopefully throughout the afternoon we'll get through everyone's questions. So do please get involved. We'd love to hear from you, and yeah, hear your thoughts and what you think of the conversations that goes on. So I'm just going to hand over to Sean. He's from Arts Over Borders. He'll tell you a little bit about what they do, and then introduce you to the afternoon. All right, well, enjoy everyone, and I'll see you in about an hour or so. All right, bye.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
My name is Sean Doran, and I'm from Arts Over Borders, and with my colleague Liam Brown, we're delighted to bring to the Zoom screen today for you one of the very finest screen and stage actresses of our time, Fiona Shaw, who will be in conversation with the theatre maker and writer Clare Brennan. To introduce you to Arts Over Borders very briefly, we work in both Britain with Creative Folkestone and in Ireland's northwest in the counties of Fermanagh, Derry, Donegal and Tyrone. And we present multi-arts festivals that are inspired by the writers Samuel Beckett, Oscar Wilde and Brian Friel. Our work is normally very landscape-based. For example, we produce readings of Homer's Odyssey on beaches, and we present Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot on upland bogs, where you, the audience, get to walk 3 kilometres up a hillside to experience the play around Anthony Gormley's stainless steel tree. But enough of Arts Over Borders and beaches and bogs. I would now like to formally introduce our artist and chairperson for you today. Fiona Shaw will be known to many of you, of course, as one of Britain's truly most dazzling and highly prized actresses. She was awarded the CBE for her contribution to the film, theatrical and televisual arts, and has been nominated for 2 Emmy Awards for her performances in Fleabag and Killing Eve. She received a BAFTA, in fact, for her performance in Killing Eve. Fiona has worked with a number of international directors, for example, including Alfonso Cuarón on Harry Potter, Jim Sheridan on My Left Foot, Brian De Palma with The Black Dahlia, and Franco Zeffirelli in Jane Eyre. Some of you, though, may also know Fiona for her television performance as the villainous witch Marnie Stonebrook on HBO's True Blood. But Fiona is also, in my book for sure, an even more extraordinary stage actress and has been in a wide range of shows, including her roles on the London stages with Electra, As You Like It, and The Good Person of Szechuan, which won her Olivia Awards for Best Actress, and her critically acclaimed performance in Machinal at the Royal National Theatre. This also won her an Olivia Award and a London Evening Standard Theatre Award for Best Actress. Her outstanding eponymous role in Medea, which for those of us who saw it was truly phenomenal, won her the Evening Standard Award for Best Actress, while also earning a nomination for the Tony Award on Broadway. And talking of New York, Fiona has performed there in Samuel Beckett's Happy Days, Samuel Coleridge Taylor's The Ancient Mariner, and Colm Tóibín's The Testament of Mary on Broadway. Most recently, she completed work on the film Ammonite and for Mrs. Wilson for the BBC. She is currently filming with the TV drama Baptiste. Our chairperson today, Clare Brennan, has been creating theatre and writing about theatre for a number of decades, thanks, as she says, to education at her school in Hull, university in Edinburgh, and training at the École Jacques Lecoq and Philippe Gaulier actor schools in Paris. Clare has worked with theatre companies in Scotland, England, Germany and Slovenia, and has written on theatre for publications including The Scotsman, The Sunday Telegraph, The Guardian, and since 2006 for The Observer, covering productions throughout the UK and beyond. I would now like to hand over to Clare, and on behalf of our fellow partners, really like to thank Fiona and Clare for making time to be with us all today as part of your NHS Make for Tomorrow series. Clare.
Hello there. Fiona, after that lovely introduction from Sean, nobody's going to be surprised to discover that you've also recently been awarded a Lifetime's Award, a Lifetime's Achievement in Theatre, which you was presented at the Dublin Festival the other night, I think. And now, to keep this in a light-hearted tone, I'm told on a Friday afternoon, it's a light-hearted tone. I noticed one of the things that you said when you received the award was that theatre is a safe way of exploring darker feelings, the mess of childhood and adolescence. And I wondered if you'd like to just maybe tell us a bit more about what that means to you.
Well, that's not very light-hearted. Well, I know. What I tried to do the other night, I was interviewed when I was given this Lifetime Achievement Award, which slightly depressed me because it means that your life is kind of over. And I thought, oh, this is the first, this is the first gong, the first knell of the of doom. But I suppose I was in the context of saying that I've been brought up in Cork, which is a very gentle, very quiet place, and not a lot happened. And my desire for things to happen was huge. I mean, looking back now, I think I never did anything worse than the theatre. I mean, I could have I could have done drug trafficking or something. That would have also been exciting, wouldn't it? But I was determined to have excitement. And I think theatre gives you that excitement. But what I meant by the dark message childhood, I think I was thinking about, as it happened in that second, I was thinking about Electra, which was the first play. I'd done a lot of comedy plays at the RSC. I played the Shrew and Portia, and I played Beatrice in Much Ado, and I'd done Celia, and I played Rosalind. I'd done all those heroines who were coming of age. And suddenly I did this play, Electra, and which is so much about a daughter battling both her mother and defending her father. And I never particularly thought I was defending my father, but when I did the play, I thought, I think this play is about me. So I think that's what I meant, that in the extremis of those feelings are in the plays, and in life they're quite tame.
I think I was struck by it as well, because that's interesting what you say about Electra and about being a daughter, because I've been struck hearing you say that the other night, because also when you talked about childhood in relation to Richard II, where as viewers might know, you played the role of Richard. And in that you said that you talked about a certain discomfort with the role for a certain time. And you said that one of the reasons you felt was possibly perhaps because you wanted to look back to childhood to find something in childhood that would help you to find the roles. And with Richard, of course, you hadn't been a boy. And that was part perhaps of the discomfort. And I was thinking that was an interesting connection between the way that feelings start to grow in us from childhood, and then they play themselves out perhaps unconsciously in our daily lives. But I don't know, perhaps as an actor, you find that you have to make that connection with your childhood conscious in order to relate it to the roles that you're playing.
Yes, when I was asked to play Richard II, I had been asked to play Hamlet, and I just thought, I don't want to play this man, you know. So Richard II was sort of offered because I played so many of the heroines. We'd kind of run out of Shakespeare parts for me at the time. And I thought, well, it'd be very difficult to play Richard II. I don't know how to go about it. And he's very feminine. So I won't have to worry about that bit. I'll be the feminine boy. And everybody was trying to say this is about gender, you know, it's really about gender and it's very feminist story. So I didn't think that at all at the time consciously. I really didn't. I don't mean that unconsciously. I'm sure that's what I was exploring, but I didn't think I was. And when it came to it, David Threlfall was playing Bolingbroke, and he was marvelous. And he said, we probably, you know, we played football and we pushed, and there was a story that when they were playing together, Bolingbroke and Richard II, that when Richard at the age of 11 was announced king, that Bolingbroke had to kneel to him, even though he was the stronger, tougher cousin. And so that's an interesting little sort of social detail that gives you something to climb on. But there was David Threlfall, you know, investigating his childhood left, right and center. And I was left thinking, I never really climbed that tree as high as I wanted, as high as my brothers. I never played football. I played hide and seek a lot or whatever. So I felt I hadn't really got that history that David was building brilliantly about our joint boy history. And it really wasn't mine. So I realized also how insecure that made me feel. Now, that makes it sound like you play every part on childhood. You don't. I think you play it on anecdote. You say, do you remember the time of Christmas when, you know, Granny dumped the turkey? You do play things to do with fragments of childhood, because they hold so much meaning. Those days between 0 and 20, when everything is, you know, or 0 and 17, when everything is sort of impaled on your mind. And I think I certainly have always used, I mean, when I played Hedda Gabler, I absolutely used my mother's life, I found myself using it, and my grandmother's life. And, you know, you don't know you're going to do that, but I did.
So that's, in a way, it's about something we're missing at the moment. Then I think what you're saying, something we're missing at the moment is connection with people. And in that, discussing David Threlfall could look at his childhood, but you were separated from that in a way. You were lacking a connection with him, I suppose, as an actor. Does that sound right? That it's not just about finding the childhood, it's also about finding the relation with the other actor in the way that they're finding their character.
Yes, I mean, he very much enjoyed dressing up as a girl. He was doing all sorts of things, and in the part of Bolingbroke sort of becoming slightly feminine too, though he wasn't really. I mean, there was a lot of games played, but that wasn't the point of the thing. I think it was just that I found it hard on all sorts of levels to play Richard II, because it's pure poetry. It is entirely in verse. It never gets off the meter, not once. It doesn't break the meter or go against the meter or go into prose. It's an amazing play. It's a sort of poem, which also gave me permission to play it, because almost a poem is higher than gender in a way. If you're all in the same verse, you're kind of held by the story of the verse. But I loved playing with him. But the deposition scene is so much, you see, you're always playing two scenes. In the deposition scene, Richard says, I give this heavy weight from off my head and this unwieldy scepter from my hand, the pride of kingly sway from out my heart, you know. So he gives away all the things that made him grand to his cousin, who used to be his best friend, you know, who now will have him killed. And I think at that moment you're playing, I give this heavy weight upon my head. You're giving this very public speech, but you're also talking privately to your cousin, saying, do you remember that time in September? I think that's what gives it its elegiac power, is what is sitting in the history of the language. And it doesn't mean that you're looking for a subtext. It's not subtext really. It's that the text is infused with history. And so it's elegiac. And I think we got to that, actually. I think we were both very connected in those scenes.
And so making a bit of a switch here, but thinking about that exterior-interior relationship that you were just talking about, that's something you've also talked about in relation to Caroline in Killing Eve, that you talk very much about. She's such a different role for you because she's so withheld.
Yeah. I'm not Carolyn at all in life, not at all. And or maybe I'm becoming more like her, by the day. I mean, Carolyn doesn't smile, and Irish people are always smiling because they're terrified of death or something, but she doesn't smile. And it is sometimes excruciatingly hard to do not to smile. And sometimes the writers put in, she smiles. And I always write back and say, no, no, she doesn't. She smiles while she says, and she very rarely smiles. Or she laughs a lot if she's had a drink, of course, which is a completely, a much bigger, value difference between her darkness and her lightness. So I have really put myself in a slightly uncomfortable position playing Carolyn, and I do lose sleep over it. I never sleep well the night before, and but I love her very, very much. I admire her very much, but I'm so not her. I haven't drawn the part to myself. I really had to go and find her.
And what is it that makes you lose sleep? What's the anxiety that stops the sleep coming?
Well, I think, I was in the theatre for 30 years, as Sean was alluding to some of my things. And, I got very used to being very tired at night at the end of running a play. If you're doing 8 Medeas a week, you're pretty knocked out effortlessly, and you wake often actually in that case with a kind of a thud of depression that you've got to do it all again. But in filming, you're often not filming all the time. So you're often off for 2 days. And then suddenly, you're on the following day. And it's not the same as being in the theatre where you're in a state of permanent practice. You're really not. And so I'm anxious about it. And I also, humor is not that easy to perform in a room with 70 crewmen and a time, a huge time issue. And it's awkward. I mean, it's great fun when it works. It sometimes works in one take and then doesn't work on another. You have to be in good form for it, actually.
There's just a question has just come in, Fiona, that I was looking at, and it asks, what was your favourite role to play?
It's funny you say that, because the favourite, I don't know if there's a favorite in the, there are moments in your life, and I've been trying to write about this lately, actually, and I'm not getting very far with it because it keeps on hopping back to my childhood. Is that, I mean, definitely I thought I was having the best time of my life when I played those heroines at the RSC, but that was my 20s, and when I played Electra, something profound happened. I think I realized that acting was not necessarily just about showing off. It is also about real things. And as it happened, my brother had been killed 2 years before I played Electra. And so the death of my brother, which Electra in the play thinks her brother's dead, or she hears her brother's dead. And so she has this terrible grief about it. And I realized that I couldn't just choose how I played that had to be dignified in relation to my own grief about my brother, that it is a real thing, that you're playing with real feelings, not just with play feelings. They're real feelings. And I think that in that way that was seminal for me. But later when I played Hedda Gabler, I thought Hedda Gabler was everything that Hedda Gabler was scared of, I was scared of. And so I really enjoyed it. It also, we set it in Ireland, and so it had a sort of, it was like doing a painting about a sort of version of my life. And being brought up in Cork, it was like being brought up in the 19th century. I mean, we didn't quite have bustles, but we almost did. And certainly the formality of language and the way in which time could become becalmed in a drawing room. Absolutely, I knew that well. So that was very important. And later, I think Medea was very important because it was a superb group of people. The cast of Medea were like a family. And we used to play a game before we started, and particularly when we were in New York. We had a strange time with Medea because we opened in Ireland and then we remounted it in London for London. And then we were invited to BAM in New York via the Kennedy Center in Washington. So all these co-productions allowed the thing to move. And so we were playing in BAM, and then we were doing a tour of America. We went off on this tour. Halfway through the tour, we were invited onto Broadway. So we never came home. And that made that a very special time. But I was exhausted. So that was important. But favorite role, the great roles are when it's really more moments. I think, as I mentioned the other night to the Dublin Theatre Festival, the moment at which I was playing Mother Courage and Swiss Cheese's body is dragged in and she has to say whether it's her son or not, and she cannot answer. These great moments, you can't believe you're part of them.
And they're very, I remember when you described that moment in Mother Courage, it was a very physical moment, a physical moment of connection between you and the audience. And a watcher called Nikki has asked how you relate to your body on stage, and wondering whether there's a relation between the language of the text and the language of the body. I'm thinking that there must be, in the way that you're describing these different roles of Medea, Hedda, Mother Courage.
Well, I've always had a rather ungainly body, so I've been I've responded very happily to any restraint put on the body. So of course in Hedda Gabler you're in corsets, and I've loved that too. And my grandmother used to wear a corset right to her old age, and she always was very upright, my granny. And I remember she lived to 94 and she always put on a corset. But I think, yes, I mean, for Medea, I just was terribly fit. I had two boys who I had to murder, who played my sons. And there's no pleasure in that, you know, there's no pleasure in that. What the pleasure is in is when it's over and that you've done it. But I used to carry these boys in. And in New York, I used to go mad when I saw between a matinee and an evening that they were having burgers, you know. I used to think, oh God, now I'm going to be carrying two boys and two big burgers. But I had to carry these boys, and one was 7 or 8 and one was 3 or 4. But they were very heavy, and that's at the end of a long play. You had to be very strong. And Johnny Cake played opposite me, and he often, he used to try and drown me, and I used to get nearly drowned. I mean, physically, I loved the physical extension of it. So yeah, it was very physical, and I liked being physical, because for me, my body was a very big part of, I don't think I was particularly self-conscious. I wasn't a good dancer or anything, but I did like using the language of letting the language go through a moving body. And I think, just to go back to Killing Eve, in Killing Eve, she doesn't move. And I think that's really good for me now. And of course, I'm also much older.
Yeah, and I imagine that the language of the text actually physicalizes the body in a way, doesn't it? So that Medea is a text that would allow you to pick up two boys with burgers in their bellies.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's one of the terrible sights. Yes, funny enough, we're just in my study here, and up there is a picture that Richard Avedon took of those two boys. There they are being carried, a Richard Avedon photograph. And actually behind me here is Electra. So this is just my little study where I have these old memories of Richard II there. So yes, I think you're not trying to be physical. I'm not. I know you trained at Lecoq. I was never very masterful of my signification of the body, but I did maybe find it freeing. I read philosophy first before I did acting, and so when I got to RADA, they said not only did I smell of libraries, which is frankly insulting, but I think I was a bit tweedy, but I was also quite stooped, because I was quite tall, and I was stooped. So I mean, I had a lot of physical rectifying to do.
So there's Phoebe Houston has asked a question. She's asking about really one-woman performance that you've been involved in, talking about the fact that theatre's having to adapt massively due to new COVID restrictions, and therefore solo performances are becoming more popular. And Phoebe says that thinking of this reminded her of first seeing you in Testament of Mary at the Barbican. And she was asking, what would you say the biggest challenges of performing in this way? And is there something you enjoy, or do you miss the interaction, responsiveness of acting with others on stage?
Yes, as I said, I think my happiest time was the Medea cast, because we were all in it together, even though, the chorus were different people. We had a wonderful time together. But I think solo performances are lonely, and I've done a ton of them. I did The Ancient Mariner, The Wasteland, which went around the world. In fact, Sean Doran, who introduced us, took us to Australia with that, with The Wasteland, which was the T.S. Eliot poem, 45 minutes long and on your own. And, you have to tune yourself to a kind of concentration and then perform it. And it's great to do. I mean, I was directed by Deborah Warner, who was always tuning it. So I was always being tuned. I was like a sort of instrument, really. She would give notes every day. Now, you weren't trying to hit the note. It was just usually to realign you, to allow the thing to be alive. It could change. And I think solo performances are lonely. They are very powerful. The thing I think, the reason I could do Testament to Mary that our speaker alludes to, is I had done so much of it that I began to get very comfortable sitting in an audience, sitting on the stage with an audience of 1,000. But I wouldn't start that on day one. I mean, the Wasteland always played to 200 initially. We felt things couldn't communicate if you were just one and a poem to more than 200. So I think there could be nothing better than solo performances. If you take a small audience, don't try and do it in a big, huge hall, just do it in a small audience so that you are in a way inveigling them to join you in the story that you're telling or the poem you're revealing, and that you're very particular and very, you have to get your rhythm in tune with the audience rhythm. You have to just join them. You know, you're being given permission. You don't have to do anything to them, but you have to do something with them. And I think solo performances could be very, very good. I wish somebody would do one locally here. I'd love to go and see, you know, if I could, with social distance, hear somebody, I don't know, speak the Oresteia or something, or I don't know, speak the Iliad. I mean, it would be these are wonderful tales, and we are tuned in to want to go with them. So they're a good idea. Or poetry is a lovely thing. If somebody's good at poetry, and poetry takes a lot of practice. People should get very good at poetry before they dare speak it. It sounds like gobbledygook on first reading otherwise.
Actually, you say the Oresteia, the German Street Theatre, I believe, is having today a 24-hour reading of the Oresteia. So you can tune into that online. Tune into it online, I think. Anybody can tune into it online. So in a way, would you say that a solo show is actually a conversation with the audience? You're not really alone on stage. You're maybe alone on stage, but you're not alone in the theatre. You're in conversation with the audience through the performance.
I only have an unstable version of myself that I'll tell you, but I mean, other people might have a different view of me. But I think some friend of mine who's a director said to me that I was, you know, remarkably not good at the fourth wall, that I at any moment would break it. I never believe that I must stay in some character that cannot come out. Even in sort of, I'm just say, for instance, in Hedda Gabler, if somebody coughed in the audience, I would look. Because if the audience can hear the cough, I can hear the cough, and I am in the same place as them, and we're all in the same place together. And it's much more honest, I think. When I was doing Scenes from an Execution at the National Theatre, the lift that I was in prison, lying in my prison, and the stage went up and it broke, it got stuck. And I was lying on top of the stage, and the stage manager came out and said, "Keep your places, everybody." And I sat up, I said, "You've got to be kidding." I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I'm in, you know, 18th century Venice when everybody is waiting for the technical hitch to fix. We can break it and go back into it. I profoundly believe that, you know, I'm not that different to the audience. I'm just the designated speaker. You know.
So given that relationship with the audience, how do you find it with film where there isn't an audience? Where is the reward in filming for you?
You see, film.
Dawn asks that question, by the way. I'm just relaying it.
It's a very good question. Is that film is about your interiority. That's much harder to reveal. I mean, I'm much happier speaking a very good text and delivering it to an audience and working like mad on it, trying to find associations with it, building it up, and then, you know, offering my conclusions of it, or my ongoing discovery of it. In film, I mean, fundamentally, the camera just wants to scour the inside of your head. And I'm not trained to that at all. That's why I think I'm coming to it very late. I think I've got better at film by not minding that the camera doesn't really care how I sculpt the line. It really cares about whether it can get inside my mind. And I think some people, which is why you may not need to be as trained in film, some people have a natural open interior life that camera is called, the camera loves it. I don't think the camera ever really loved me because I was so busy controlling what I was doing. Suddenly, and relaxing on stage so that I'm not so controlled, but in front of a camera I was very controlled. If you're just yourself and very open, the camera gets a chance to really see, and sometimes it loves that. So yeah, the camera is trying to find something else out. Some people vibrate in front of a camera, they just do.
And so you seem to have a kind of a sort of double eye in that sense, both on, so you're looking from inside out onto outside, how is what you're doing being received, but you're also thinking about it, I think, from an outsider's point of view in the way that you're describing film. And what Sophia Elena wants to know is, I know you've directed certain things, you've directed particularly operas, haven't you? And she wants to know if she's also asking, would you be interested in directing film or a series on television?
Yes, I think I would. It's partially whether you have time in your life, you know. I think a film takes 2 years of your life. I mean, I would, if somebody came to me, I think I'd be very interested to do that. I'm not sure I want to queue up at the BFI and beg to be asked to do it, which may exclude me. But I do think the right people should do the right project. If the right project came to me, I'd be very happy to direct a film. I love
in
doing
your
it.
head what would be the right project?
Well, probably not a war movie with 2,000 tanks shooting at each other, you know, that probably would interest me, but something to do with people. I think what I've enjoyed doing with my opera, which is very like doing a film or a stage thing, is encouraging people to tune into the bit of themselves that can, through rigor, actually explode the possibility of who they are. So you know, I've been so helped by being directed that it has allowed me to play a much wider, it's been like reading lots of books. You know, if you read lots of books, you live in many, many lives. And I've had that privilege by performing lots of different lives. And it's very fulfilling, I have to say. You feel you've eaten a bit of this and this period and that violence or that joy or that humor. And so I think I would love to help other people do that. I mean, I really love teaching. I love teaching students, and that has been gone since, you know, I used to do a lot. I'd be invited to colleges in America or here, and I loved doing that. But of course, that's out of the question at the moment. But I love being with young actors, and I love learning from them because their preoccupations, their vision is completely different to mine.
And an anonymous attendee asks, are there still some roles that really follows on from what you're saying about how it expands your life? Is there a little gap in your life? Are there roles that you would still like to play?
For a long time, I thought I'd work up to trying to play Cleopatra.
Uh-huh.
I didn't think I was a natural Cleopatra. You might not think so, but I thought I would love just to speak those lines, you know, we're dying, Egypt dying. This sort of hovering abstraction of where Shakespeare was able to tune in almost metaphysically to a country that he couldn't have known, never have seen. And we may not know, we don't know Cleopatra's Egypt. And to be called Egypt is not really you know, anything to do with Egyptians. It's somehow to do with being of a culture that hovers above history and was, or, you know, and just to dare to go into that kind of that dreamlike place of what Cleopatra in the play, not in real life. Of course, she was much more interesting in real life. But as time has gone, my moment for playing Cleopatra may have gone, but I also have lost interest in it. So I'm now much more interested. You see, the theatre has changed radically in the last few years because I was brought up in a very, I now see such a small world of the theatre. It was white. Now, we being women, we were always fighting for more parts for women, and that's fair enough. But now the issue has become race. And I do think that it's only fair that mostly, if you can, and you were a white protagonist, that you stand aside and allow somebody from another culture to take that place for a while. I'm sure after about 5 years, I'll say, can I come back? But for the moment, I think the stage should be handed to the races who have not had enough time on those stages. And we would learn from them. And if we could be of any service to them, I'd love to be part of that or in that. Or so I've lost interest in saying, what is the next role that I should play? I'm much more interested about where is the theatre going, and maybe I could help it go that way.
So you act, you direct, you teach. And so Catherine is asking, she's saying, I can quite agree with her. She says she's exhausted listening to your amazing acting exploits and challenges. And she wonders, what do you do to unwind?
Well, actually, I've been doing a lot of unwinding in the last 5 years. I don't work near as hard. I take it back 2 years. About 2 years ago, I started Killing Eve, sorry, 3 years ago. And in that year, I also had agreed to do Medea the Opera for the Wexford Festival. I nearly had a nervous breakdown. I was flying to Wexford, trying to do this opera, which was terribly difficult because it's a very unwieldy opera, having to get to Dublin, which is very hard, and wait 2 hours to get a plane to London, act in Killing Eve and go back to Wexford, which kindly Killing Eve sort of managed the timing to allow me to do. The following year, I was doing Cendrillon for Glyndebourne. So I spent the year designing Cendrillon, but also doing Killing Eve. And so for the 3rd year of Killing Eve, I said no more operas. So I have stopped actually doing that kind of craziness. I was also doing London Assurance at the National, whilst I directed Energy for Young Lovers, which was on at the Young Vic. So I had to go down and see the cast and then go up to the National. To be honest, I think I got tired of it too. I thought, I don't know if I'm enjoying this. This is too much work. So I'm not doing as much.
And is that, and so that ties in with the next question really, which is an anonymous attendee who's asking, how's your way of coping or managing pressure or stress changed over the years? And presumably it's changed by you now saying sometimes no.
I think I couldn't say no before. So true. I think I couldn't say no. I would, if somebody said, would you like to go to Pitlochry and do a talk, one evening? I'd say I think I would, because I've enjoyed traveling. I enjoy getting on the train. So I couldn't say no, and I'd be terrified that I'd missed out on something if I didn't go. So I have begun to say no. Yeah.
Do you think that's part of a natural insecurity of an actor, that especially at the beginning of a career for an actor, the insecurity is enormous, isn't it? Will I have work? Will work continue to come?
I would say to the young actor, say yes. I mean, I said yes, say yes, because you can take the strain of it. It can be stressful if you do 2 things at once. You probably shouldn't do that. In general, I never did 2 things at once, in that these big plays I did take a whole year. So when I was suddenly asked to go to Pitlochry or Wales or France or America to do, I was thrilled to get the variation into my life, because otherwise I was quite in a rehearsal room from 10 a.m. till 6 and then performing in the evening, or 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. and then the play would go on. I spent a lot of my daytimes wasted. I do feel I've lost a lot of my life to acting. A lot of my waking up in the morning and having a nice morning of some kind, and then from about 1 o'clock in the day being slightly anxious about the evening. That's a huge, not being able to have anything too emotional. You couldn't have a row with somebody in the afternoon. So, tempering your life to preparing for getting down at about 4:30 to the theatre, then going for a run, and then meeting the group and doing a bit of it was quite monastic in that way. I mean, I loved it, but I am thrilled to have more of my life back.
And Carol Claydon's been very kind in waiting a long time for me to get around to asking her question, which is, what's your greatest achievement so far?
Surviving.
Yeah, what's your greatest achievement so far?
My greatest achievement. I don't know. My greatest achievement. I don't think of it. I think achievement. I honestly don't think like that. Maybe because I was insatiable about achievement. I mean, I can tell you about great nights, but it's all a bit abstract now. But, when we took Richard II, that really had got hammered in England, even though it had been a very hard and very well wrought piece, when it went to Paris, and the Parisians had no problem with Richard II because they had chopped all their kings' heads off and they had no problem with it. When it opened in Paris, the audience went wild. And I remember feeling, this is an achievement, because I had been particularly hammered in London for playing this, for daring to play this king, and then to go to France and find that they were so delighted with the theatricality of what it was. That was an achievement. That's a long time ago. I don't think of things as achievement, really. I think of it as actually traveling is what I think of it as, that I've enjoyed the travels of it all.
And when you said about Richard II, when it's opened in Britain, and it wasn't well received, as you say. You said you went to bed for 2 days.
I did.
I mean, what must that be like, really, when a performer's, and you know, you obviously really thought about this role. It was very well crafted, etc., etc., and you've given it to the people, and then you're getting this negative response. How do you cope with that? What strategies do you have in place, or did you have strategies in those days besides going to bed for 2 days?
No, the worst thing was the production was praised. I was hammered, and that seemed
Right.
so terrible when I put myself in an uncomfortable place to do it. I had done a ton of Shakespeare, so it wasn't that I didn't understand verse or how to speak it or how to be it. So it was a kind of I think it was an attack against the gender of the person playing it. And you know, 20 years later, I'm more proud of that than anything else. And it, you know, it did terribly well elsewhere. I mean, when it wasn't in England. I think England had associated history plays with themselves. But I did go to bed for 2 days. I felt so abused, because if I had been really prepared for it, I should have come out fighting. But there's no fighting that. All you're doing is changing something. So I was murdered for a bit, but I think something shifted. That's why there's so many, you know, all-female productions now. This wasn't an all-female production. It was all men except for Richard II, who we hoped people would believe was a man.
Mm. Switching from tragedy to comedy, anonymous attendee says that they remember seeing Fiona Shaw in Three Men and a Baby, and she was such a wonderful comic actress. And do you prefer to do tragedy, or do you like a balance of both for your yearly diet?
Well, I mean, Three Men and a Lady was a funny film that I did at the end of Electra, oddly, that I just finished Electra and I went up to do that. I went to America. You know, it was fun to do and I enjoyed it. It was like the 3 weeks of my life. I don't remember much more about it. I do love doing comedy. And comedy is hard in that I've done a lot of comedies. Comedies aren't necessarily funny. I think Hedda Gabler was very funny and Medea was quite funny until it wasn't. I mean, that was what was enjoyable to do. I don't know if I see it as that different. I mean, I enjoyed being very witty as Hedda Gabler, almost more fun doing that and knowing that the end was going to be of some terrible shock, so that the emotions in the evening are being absolutely massaged into different directions. Comedy itself is hard. I remember I played In the Way of the World at the National. I played Millamant, and Geraldine McEwen was brilliant as Lady Wishford. And Lady Wishford is a comic turn, so you know, maybe one day I'll play Lady Wishford. Actually, I'd love to have a go at Lady Wishford. But Millamant is very witty, but oddly by then wit had changed, and by the time we played it, and I played it with the wonderful Roger Allam, who's a marvelously funny man, and had me howling most of the time, you know, when we weren't acting. And I wasn't very funny as Millamant. I think I was too like Millamant in some way. So you often have to find something slightly outside yourself to really come in and hit it for comedy to happen. If it's too near you, you know, it just doesn't quite work. So I'm always wary of the word comedy in that way.
So there has to be kind of almost a mask for a comic character to work.
There has to be. Well, I mean, I was also in, you know, London Assurance at the National, where the first entrance was, I played a character called Lady Gay Spanker, and she had to come in laughing. And so I worked really hard at this laugh, that she laughs for about 5 minutes nonstop. And it's really hard to do because you've got to really laugh, because people can detect if you're not really laughing. You have to really, really laugh. And my lungs, you know, it didn't matter what mood I was in, I had to get into this laugh, and I would do the laugh. And the audience were crying, laughing because she was laughing. No, there's nothing witty in that, but it was great fun. I would just laugh, and the audience would laugh, and we were all laughing, just non-stop, just couldn't stop laughing. She's laughing because her saddle fell off her horse or something. It was completely nonsense. And there was another wonderful moment in that when two lovers are kissing at the beginning, and Lady Gay Spanker, who the audience loved because she's called Lady Gay Spanker about many years, comes in and says, "Oh," and the audience would fall about. Now, the only thing you just say was "oh," and I used to think, well, maybe I've got to time my "oh" bit better or less. It didn't matter whether you did it well or bad. You just go in and say "oh," and the whole audience laughed. So those well-constructed comedies are great fun to be in, but they're not necessarily as fulfilling as being witty in something that is doing something more, I suppose.
We're talking really in a way about communicating without language and how beautifully that works with an audience. And Auro has a question. I'm sorry, Auro, if that's not how to pronounce your name. Auro says, do you speak other languages apart from English so that you can participate in other countries' classic plays? And then Auro pays you a nice compliment, saying, in London Kills Me, there's a perfectly pronounced sentence you say in Spanish, and Auro is himself a Spaniard.
Well, thank you, because I don't speak Spanish, but I speak French because my family, my two brothers live in France for the last 30 years, and my nephew is French. We don't speak French together particularly, but I've spent more time in France, so I speak French a bit. But I was asked, would I go to the l'Odéon in Paris to be in Le Balcon some years ago, and I said no, because I feel that in the end, I don't have. It actually goes back to this question you had about history. I don't think I have enough history to be able to sculpt the language with any historical understanding. Only, and I think then I would sound the equivalent of this. And that wouldn't communicate anything. So I have foregone being anything in another language. I mean, I wish I could. I wish I could have my life again, and I would be playing Lorca in Spanish if I could.
Now, an anonymous attendee wants to know, was Harry Potter as much fun and wild on set as it appears to us? And does uplifting work as an actress change you personally, or do you keep your work and your personal self strictly separate?
Uplift you personally? Well, there are two very different things there. Harry Potter was, again, very much a small part of my life. It took 2 weeks. The Dursleys were the family of the Dursleys, who were Muggles, as everybody knows. We were separate, and we were kept separate. And so we had our house scenes. Richard Griffiths, God rest him, and who was just heaven, and the boys as they grew up. And we became very friendly with the boys. I had a lovely time with Harry Potter himself, but also Harry Melling, who played Dudley Dursley, who later played my son in Mother Courage as a beautiful, handsome young man. And he's turned into a superb actor who's become really well known. At 9 he was a wonderful actor, and he's still a wonderful actor, and I enjoyed very much having more to do with him when he grew up. So we would have good fun together, the four of us, and we did enjoy it. I mean, the most astonishing things happened on Harry Potter. I thought it was going to be very high tech. In fact, it's quite low tech. There were owls, and Mrs. Dursley looks out the window at these owls, and the owls look at her, and she looks at the owls, and the owls look at her. And the owls stopped looking at me because the camera was behind them, and they kept on looking at the camera. Owls do that. So they tied mice to my apron.
Oh.
So I'm looking at the mice, and the mice are hanging here, and the owls just kept looking at the mice. So I thought, this is hardly high tech. So I'm acting my scene with mice hanging from my apron just to keep the attention of the owls. I mean, very funny things. The letters used to coming down the chimney. They all came down the chimney. There were about 100,000 letters, and we all had to tidy them up, because the quicker we all helped, the quicker the next take happened. Things that you think happen by magic, they don't. They happen by people. But I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed. But again, it was 2 weeks every year. That's all over those years. The worst being when I had finished Medea on Broadway on a Saturday, after, as the story I told you, that was 6 months away. I had to fly back on Sunday morning and got into London Sunday night and started Harry Potter on Monday morning. Wow. Because that was the permission I was given to be allowed to do Medea. I had to start absolutely on that Monday. So I did that, but that nearly killed me.
Well, that takes us really into another question, quite a slightly different tone, by an anonymous attendee, who says that in their work, they seek to understand people's thoughts, behaviours and emotions by listening to their narrative and empathising with them. And at times for them, this becomes emotionally exhausting. So what they wonder is, when you're playing a character who's going through difficult or negative emotions, how does it impact you, and how easily can you distance yourself from your character's emotions? So I imagine, like, switching from Medea into this other character so quickly. How do you manage this?
Well, I don't know how to answer that. I think it goes back to the second half of the question before, is the uplifting element, is that I think I always felt that what I was doing in those big classic plays was worthwhile, because the plays themselves are sort of bombs of knowledge and wisdom in that they release. I mean, Medea is the darkest play of all because it's not really a tragedy, it's a catastrophe. There is no good outcome in it. It is merely tells us that what is, and that is not in our Christian Western culture. We're always thinking that there's it's sad, but something good will come out of it. Nothing good comes out of Medea. And it's the darkest part of the mind. And I think I underestimated the effect of Medea on us all. I mean, obviously, I just felt very physically tired. And on a Sunday in New York, we used to play on a Sunday afternoon. I would try and go to a movie that night, and I would just sort of fall asleep watching a film in a cinema, and then the following morning feel dreadful. You didn't play on a Monday and you played on a Tuesday. I think I underestimated how hard that was. And when I see photographs of myself at the time, I think I look older than I look now. I looked absolutely shattered. I think that was just my way of just saying, no, it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't. Now, of course, it didn't make me murderous or anything like that. On the contrary, you're playing out the humanity of someone. The action is just the consequence of the action of the play. The person you're playing is like you or me. They're just they're just people. But I think when I was doing Testament of Mary on Broadway, and outside there was riots, there were people shipped in from sort of rather right-wing fundamentalist Catholic groups who came saying blasphemy, blasphemy, because they never saw the play, so it wasn't blasphemous. And they would be holding these things and shouting, so much so that the producer had to put padding on the front of the theatre on the first night. He padded the front doors so that the noise of the protesters wouldn't affect the first night. I mean, that's pressure. I don't think I think I underestimated that. And I got a terrible ear infection from the water, but I think I was run down. So this desire, the sort of self-immolating desire that I must have had in me, has gone. I don't feel that now. I don't want to do any damage to myself. So I think it did have more of an effect than I think. But overall, the effect is healthy because you are going through tragedy. And I think that's really good for people. Makes you understand something, I think.
And I think, yes, so understanding something is a way of listening to the world outside and then allowing you through listening to communicate something back to the world outside, perhaps.
Yes, I mean, we are only actors. I know people who have lost families. I mean, this is vicarious what we do. It's not dangerous what we do. It's maybe, it's a privilege to throw light on these things, but there are people, the Rwangas, and I mean, the people who are the suffering in this world is unbearable. And I do think, our newspapers and our media are getting caught on the royal family or on Brexit or on, these are tiny things. There is huge suffering in the world and we do not look at it enough, and it is the thing that would humanize us. I mean, I am so privileged, as is anybody who sees a play or is in a play, to be in a world where that can be. Of course, we're not now. We're getting a tiny dose of something that impedes our cultural absorption. But culture is, such a privilege. It is the top of a civilization, that culture should exist. It is a wonderful moment, and I've had a lifetime of it. So I don't think I understand suffering the way the people who suffer understand suffering. My job has been very easy.
But I think that nonetheless, it's very necessary to everybody to have culture, to have actors, to have the experience of actors. And I say that because I once had the great good fortune to myself, which was a terrible misfortune for everybody else around me, which was the misfortune of a lot of people from Democratic Republic of Congo who'd been made exiles and were refugees in Rwanda. And they'd been exiled and taken a year to arrive in this space that was now a refugee camp where they were being housed. And they'd been settled there for some weeks. And for the first time, they had a celebration. And the person who was the speaker announcing the celebration, the maitre d', who was one of the refugees, said, "We have reason to celebrate today because today we're going to sing and dance, and what makes us human is to sing and dance." And that was what they did, and they created their own play. And that through creating plays, through creating drama, that is an expression of the joy of life, which allows people to accommodate the suffering of life, perhaps. But maybe I think we have to draw to close, and not to close on that note, but to ask a question from Julie, who says that she loves watching you on the screen, and it's always a sure sign that something is going to be great. So she says, how has lockdown been for you? Have you discovered new passions or habits, or had any light bulb moments to share with us?
Well, of course, it was a strange, we're all having a similar experience. And I was just out up on Hampstead Heath this morning, and everybody is just gulping down the last bit of sunshine we got for about 2 hours before it went grey again. And when it first happened, I was in Budapest filming Baptiste, which I'm now continuing, starting on Monday again. We're back on it because we've been off for the six months. And the sun came out, as anybody who has a garden will know. And so for April, I was in my garden painting. I do very bad paintings and I love doing them. I paint away and I gardened away, and being at home for that time was beautiful, but of course tinged with the sorrow of hearing sirens from ambulances going up and down the Canterbury Road. So that wasn't, that was a very weird time, but it was, at least summer was coming in to us. So that was a discovery, that being at home, I read a lot, read those thick books I had never read that I'd meant to read before. And that was very pleasant. But I must say, I don't think it's doing anybody any good now. And I wouldn't mind it finishing, but it's not going to finish. So I think we've got to find maybe a language to learn. I'm going to take up my cello for the winter, actually. I gave it up many, many years ago. I'm going to take it up again.
So on that musical note, perhaps, we will have to say thank you very much indeed. Thank you for
sharing. You for those lovely questions, and everybody.
Thank you to everybody for sending in your questions, which have just been great. And I'm sorry because we can't answer all of the questions. People have been so delightful and so engaged. So again, Fiona, thank you very much indeed.
Excellent. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Oh yeah, thank you, Claire. Thank you, Fiona. What a fascinating conversation, and particularly I hope you, everyone at home, in hospital wards, in offices, that you too was engaged as I was. And I think, yeah, it was really interesting, that moment in the conversation where you talked about access to culture. And it's true. I mean, I for one think it should be a human right, but I know that so many people face so many barriers to it. And so thank you, both of you, for giving us a glimpse actually into the behind the scenes world of this these cultural things that are, yeah, they teach us about ourselves, about each other. And yeah, it was just really fascinating. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing. It was a really, really rich, theatrical, I felt pulled into the world of theatre and performance and the kind of processes that kind of go on behind the scenes. I mean, as a recipient of those things, you just see that kind of finished story. But yeah, it was great, really fascinating. Thank you both so much for giving your time. We really, really appreciate it. And also thank you so much to all of you posting those questions. There were some real good ones. There's some really good ones. I was sort of like chomping at the bit to ask stuff, and then a question would pop up and it would get asked. So yeah, that was great. Thanks for being involved, and thank you everyone for spending time with us this afternoon. We are in strange days, and I think although there are of course limitations about being able to be together through a screen, nonetheless it is really important to find these connections and for us to come together. And I hope that you have been enriched as much as I have this afternoon. But yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you for all of those who contributed. Just final little things to say is we do need to say a huge thank you to our funders who have funded this whole programme. So all the visual artists, all the performers and speakers, and the partners. So we want to say a big thank you to Arts Council England and to NHS Charities Together. We couldn't be here without you, so we are incredibly grateful. And to the amazing charity Heads On, is the trust charity who managed to bring in those funds for us. So yeah, that's great. And just to say, do come back. We've got loads more exciting stuff happening in the programme. So next week we've got a really brilliant landscape painting. Here you go, Fiona, this is one for you. Feel free to sign up. We've got a landscape painting. Yeah, do it. And with the amazing artist Hannah Brown, she's going to be doing a participatory workshop. So do check out the Make Your Mark website to find out a bit more about that. And then very excitingly, next week we have another In Conversation on Wednesday afternoon with the amazing writer Marianne Keyes. So she's going to be chatting and sharing her wisdoms of the world with us. So do please join us for those, and just keep your eye, follow us on social media, keep your eye on the Make Your Mark website, because there are new and upcoming events being announced all the time, and we just Love it. We love it when you join us. You give it life and make it worthwhile. So yeah, so I think that's a bit about it, everyone. Thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you again, Fiona. Thank you again, Claire. That was completely amazing. Totally brilliant. All right, bye for now, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.